Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome everyone. Welcome to lecture 10 of this course, Grammatical Rules and Systems. In this lecture, we will take a different point of view of what we discussed previously. We discussed phrases so far, so here we will take a look at all phrases and how they form basic types of clause structure. So we will look at simple clauses, at simple sentences which are formed of one clause, and we will see the basic structure of these clauses. So we have 5 basic structures for one clause sentences in English. These are like skeletons for the human body. Okay, so they are the basis, and then we can add other elements to them. So these elements are necessary. Okay, so we have a choice of 5 basic clause structure types. So these are ways to form the clause, and they are basic and they are necessary. Okay, the elements in these clauses or in these types are necessary. We can also expand these clauses. So we have necessary elements and we have optional elements. And if you remember, we said some of the optional elements include adjuncts and modifiers. And some of the necessary elements, for example, include the subject, include the verb, include the complement. So, and we have 2 kinds of elements, those that are necessary and those that are optional. So, after we have the basic structure, after we have the basic clause structure, and we can add to it, we can add more modifiers like adjuncts and modifiers to make it a bit elaborate, to expand on it, and we will see some examples of this later on in this lecture. Each of these 5 types, we will show you the 5 types in a bit, but each of them follow this basic pattern. Okay, so they follow subject as an MP and then a predicate which is a VP. Okay, so a noun phrase which functions as the subject, and then a verb phrase which functions as a predicate. The verb phrase, if you remember, I mentioned this briefly, can include a verbal group, and it can include other elements. So in the VP we can have complements, we can have objects. Okay, so not only verbs in the VP, there are other elements. We will look at them in a bit. In each of these types, the subject will come first. So normally it comes first. There are certain exceptions. We will look at one exception at the end of the lecture. So the subject normally comes first and then followed by a verb phrase. As we saw the basic pattern above, first the subject and then the predicate. Okay? Only the composition of the verb phrase changes in each type. So the subject stays the same. We don't change it. What changes in these basic types is the composition of the verb phrase. So the verb phrase may contain the following elements. So these are elements that we can combine together to change the VP, to change the verb phrase in these basic types of clause structure. So these elements, or constituents if you will, are, number 1, intransitive verbs, and we abbreviate those as VI. If you remember, we said intransitive verbs don't take an object. 2, transitive verbs, these are abbreviated as VT. Okay, so V and then a small I, this means intransitive, and then V with a small t, it means transitive verb. And this includes both types of transitive verbs, monotransitive and ditransitive, that we discussed previously. As I said, this lecture will be something like a review of some of the points we discussed previously. Number 3, be, verb to be, which is, am, are, was, were, and of course been in the past participle, but we need finite verb. Of course, been, past participle is not finite. So the finite forms of be, is, am, are, was, or were, and another copula. As we said, copulas are linking verbs. They link the subject with something after the copula. Okay, so he is here, he is here, he, this is the subject, and then we have is, the verb to be, and then here is an adverb. Is links the subject with the adverb. Okay, we call this copula. So the verb to be in its finite forms, if it is preceded by have, we can have it in non-finite form like been. Okay, we can use it as been. Number 4, we have the complement. This is also another element that we can add to the VP, and it is abbreviated as C. Okay, so if you look at this and see the symbol C or the abbreviation C, that means we are talking about complements. These include noun phrases. We will abbreviate them as MP, as we saw earlier. MP means noun phrase. This is one of the complements. Complements, as we said, are things that are necessary for the completion of meaning. Again, we mentioned this in previous lecture. The elements that must be in the sentence to complete the meaning. Those include noun phrases. They include adjective phrases. So adjective phrases can be complements, and adverbials, they can be complements, if you remember from our discussion of each phrase type. Then we have the element of the direct object and the indirect object. These are two elements. Direct object, we can abbreviate it as DO, and indirect object, we abbreviate it as IO. So D small and then capital O, DO, this is an abbreviation of the direct object, and IO, I, small I, and then capital O, I, indirect, and then O, object. Okay, so these are the elements that we can use to form different types of clause structure in these 5 types. Okay, now it's time to look at these 5 types in detail. So the following table that we will see now shows the 5 basic types of clause structure in English. So in the first column we have the type, then we have the structure of VP. As we said, it can change. We have different elements that we can add to the VP. We listed them previously now. So previously we listed these parts that we can add, or these elements that we can add to the VP, and we will see them in this column. And then we'll see an example of each of these types. So in number 1, this is type 1. Okay, so type 1 of clause structure. This is the first basic type. It is VI, as we said, intransitive verb, and it either takes nothing, so just the subject, then VI, the intransitive verb, and then nothing. Okay, and in each of these types the subject comes first, as I mentioned before. Okay, so in this example, in A, we waited, we have the subject, and then we have an intransitive verb. Okay, in B, this is type 1B. Okay, so type 1, we also have the intransitive verb that comes with a complement, and in this case a complement is an adverb. Okay, so an adverb can come with the intransitive verb, as in the example in B, we sat down. We is the subject. We need a subject, of course, in these clauses, and then sat is an intransitive verb, and then down is an adverbial. It can function here, depending on your view, as a complement. Okay, we can say it is a complement. Number 2, type 2 here is verb to be plus a complement. The complement can be an MP, a noun phrase. It can be an adjective phrase, which we abbreviate as ADJ, and it can be an adverbial, which we can abbreviate as ADV. So MP, ADJ, or ADV. So these are all complements that can come with the verb to be and before it the subject. As we said, these function as the complements of subject plus verb to be. For example, here we have the verb to be with an MP complement. He was my friend. My friend is a noun phrase, and it is the complement of the subject, he, and the verb to be was. Then we have in B, he was intelligent. Here we have an adjective, intelligent. It is the complement of the subject, he, and the verb to be was. Then we have an adverbial. So here, in my class, this is a prepositional phrase, and it is an adverbial, as we mentioned previously. So he was in my class. He is the subject, was is the verb to be, and in my class is the adverbial that functions as the complement of the subject plus verb to be. So these are the first two types. Then intransitive verbs, they can come alone or they can come with an adverbial complement, or the verb to be plus a complement. And the complement can be a noun phrase, an adjective phrase, or an adverbial. The third basic type is the transitive verb plus a direct object. So transitive verb plus a direct object, they can come alone in the sentence, or they can be followed by an adverbial, and in this case the adverbial will be a complement. So in A, I made a mistake, I made a mistake. Made is a transitive verb, and then it is followed by the direct object, a mistake, okay, and there is nothing after it. So this is an example of A. B, I put the key in the lock. I is the subject, put is a transitive verb, and then the key is a direct object. So put needs an object, and in this case it is the key, but also the key needs more for the meaning. Okay, so put, where did I put the key? Okay, you might ask, okay, I put the key where? And the answer is in the lock. So I put the key in the lock. In the lock here is a complement. It is of course an adverbial. So transitive verb plus direct object. You might be familiar with all of these because we discussed these previously, but now we are trying to organize them in a different way, as a form of review and as a form of showing you how we can look at these in another way. So the third type is a transitive verb plus a direct object. It can be followed with an adverbial complement. In number 4, the basic type 4, we have the transitive verb, we have the indirect object, and then we have the direct object. We also have options to change or rephrase or restate this type using to and using for. You will notice that we put them between brackets. That means there are just other ways, okay, other ways of doing this. So we don't need to use to, and we don't need to use for. For example, in A, I gave him an answer. I, the subject, we need a subject as we said, and then it is followed by the verb gave, which is a transitive verb. It is ditransitive. It needs two objects. It needs an indirect object and a direct object. So I gave him, this is the indirect object, and an answer, this is the direct object. We can restate this. We can say I gave an answer to him. We can start with the direct object and then follow it with the indirect object using to. So I gave an answer to him, or as it is here, I gave him an answer. So to is an option, the way to change the sentence. Then we have he made me a suit. So in this example, he is the subject, made is a transitive verb, it is ditransitive, we need two objects. Me is indirect, and then a suit is direct, it is a direct object. We can change this sentence and rephrase it as he made a suit for me. Notice we need to use for, not to. So sometimes to is possible, sometimes for is possible, sometimes both are not possible. So it is not always possible to use to or for to make the direct objects come first. So he made a suit for me, or he made me a suit. Me is an indirect object and a suit is a direct object. So this is type 4. So type 3, we can call it monotransitive verbs. So they take one object, and we can include a complement as an adverbial with them. In type 4, we have ditransitive verbs. They take two objects, indirect and direct. Number 5, we also come back to monotransitive verbs, only one object, but those must have a complement. Okay, so those must have a complement in the form of a noun phrase, MP, or an adjective phrase. So in A, I found him a boar. A boar is a noun phrase, MP. We have I, subject, found, the verb, him, the direct object of the verb found, and then a boar is a complement. We can't say I found him, because the meaning will change. You remember we discussed this a lot previously. So when we say I found him, that means he was lost, and then I found him, looked for him and found him. But this means I believe, I think that he is a bore. Okay? We can also use adjective phrases in this type. So we can say, I found him boring. Boring, here is an adjective. We have the subject I. We have the verb found. Him is the direct object. It needs a complement, and we use the adjective as a complement in this case. Okay? So these are the basic types of clause structure, 5 types. And as we mentioned at the beginning of the lecture, each of those can be expanded with other elements. So we can use adjuncts to expand them. We can use modifiers. For example, we can expand the first sentence in type 1. We said type 1 is an intransitive verb, and we can use it alone. We can say we waited, so subject and then intransitive verb, nothing after it. We can expand this with an adjunct. Okay, so this is optional. We can say we waited in the car. So in the car here, this is type 1 plus adjunct. We can remove in the car, it is not necessary, but this is a way to make the sentence more, to give us more information, to expand the sentence with extra or optional elements. Simple sentences have only one clause, as we said before. Okay, so they can be expanded even more by combining them with other clauses. So we can form compound and complex sentences by combining clauses together. Of course, the basic types that we discuss here are concerned with simple sentences. Okay, so simple sentences, these are the 5 types. If you want to add other elements to them, if you want to add other clauses, they will change, of course. You will need to have more elements. So these 5 basic types are for one clause simple sentences. As we said, we can add optional elements like adjuncts and modifiers, and we even can add more clauses to simple clauses or simple sentences with one clause to make compound and complex sentences. This will be the focus of discussion in lecture 11, 12 and 13. But be careful, do not confuse the 5 types of basic clause structure that we discussed today with the 5 types of complex verbal groups that we discussed in lecture 5. So, in the 5 types of complex verbal groups, for example, we said type 1 was the modal plus the infinitive. Okay? Don't confuse it with the basic clause structure types, because we can use complex verbal groups in the basic clause structure types. I will explain. Okay? Let's go back to this. So, in this case, we went back to our table. In the first type of clause structure, or basic types of clause structure, we said type 1 is the verb and it is intransitive. It doesn't take any object. And we gave the example, we waited. Okay, so waited is the verb here, and we can change it. We can use either a simple verb, one word verb like waited, or we can use a complex verbal group. And in this case, we go back to the 5 types. Okay, so instead of saying we waited, we can say we can wait. Okay, so we can wait. Here we have type 1 of the complex verbal group, type 1, and then we also have type 1 of clause structure. Okay, so we can combine these two. The verb can change. It can either be simple or it can be complex. If you want it to be complex, we can use the 5 types of verbal groups in the 5 types of clause structure here. I hope this is clear. So in this case, the verb intransitive, we can say we can wait. Okay, or we can sit down if we want. Or I made a mistake. The transitive verb can be I can make a mistake. This is type 1 of the complex verbal groups. Okay, so we can either have a simple verb or a complex verbal group using the 5 types we discussed previously in lecture 5. So go back to lecture 5, compare the two, and hopefully you will understand the difference. Please don't confuse them, because we have type 1, type 2, type 3. You might find them a bit confusing. but comparing them you'll find that there is nothing to be confused about them. Okay, producing good grammar is often a question of fitting a verb into the basic type or types appropriate to it. So if you want to make grammatical sentences that native speakers hear and say, okay, this is good grammar, this is a question of taking a verb and putting it in the type that it is appropriate for it. Okay, the type that is appropriate for the verb. So some verbs can fit into type 1, for example. Some verbs can fit into type 2, 3, and so on. Some verbs may even fit into more than one type. They can fit into type 3 and 4, and as we will see in this example. So the verb tell, it can fit in basic type 3, as seen in the example below, and it can also fit into type 4. So the verb tell can take one object. It can be monotransitive, so in this case it is type 3. So we have the subject, we have the verb, and then the direct object. So this is type 3. And it can also be ditransitive. So he told the truth and he told me the truth. Okay, so he told the truth and he told me the truth. He told the truth is type 3, and he told me the truth is type 4, which is a ditransitive verb that takes an indirect object and a direct object. Okay, so told can fit into basic type 3 and basic type 4. On the other hand, we have other verbs that can only fit, for example, in basic type 3. So they can't fit into basic type 4, like tell. So explain in this case, this is an example of a verb that can only fit in basic type 3. So it can only be monotransitive. It cannot be ditransitive. So for example, he explained the answer. Explained, this is the verb. It is transitive, but only takes one object, so monotransitive. The answer, of course, is the direct object. So this is type 3, as we saw in the table above. Look at the second example here. This is wrong. This is incorrect. Okay, he explained me the answer. This is not correct, because explain cannot take two objects. We can't use me as an indirect object with explain. So type 4 is not possible with the verb explain and other verbs. So you need to understand that to produce grammatical sentences, to use good grammar, you need to be careful what verb you choose with each type. So some verbs can be used with type 1, some verbs can be used with type 3, 4, some verbs can be only used with one type, type 3 for example, and so on. Let's look at the exercise. Which of the underlined element is not a necessary element of the following clause? And be careful, something like this might come in the exam. I want you to notice the type of the question, okay, because if you go to the exam without looking at we do here, you might not know how to answer. So be careful about this type of question. I might give you a sentence and I underline certain words or phrases in the sentence, and then I put a number under each one. And I ask you for something. For example, in this case, tell me the element which is not. Look, not is underlined. It is in capital letters, just to pay attention. So not necessary. Elements that are not necessary, optional. Elements that we can remove, we can take away. Like adjuncts. When we said adjuncts are optional, so we can take away. So if you see one of the underlined words or phrases or the elements that is an adjunct or a modifier, you can just choose A if it is the first underlined one, or you choose B if it is the second one, or you can choose C if it is the third one. If all elements are necessary, so if it is not 1, it is not 2, it is not 3, you just choose D. Let's look at the example. Be careful. See how I solve this question. Number 1, he was in my home yesterday. Here we have an underline under was. Okay, so was has a line under it. And I have another line under in my house. So in my house has another line. And yesterday, I have a third line under yesterday. Was, I put 1 under was. And in my home, I put 2 under in my home. And I put 3 under yesterday. So is 1 not necessary? If it is not necessary, you choose A. Is 2 not necessary? If it is not necessary, you choose B. Is 3 not necessary? If it is not necessary, you choose C. Okay, so let's look at number 1. He was in my house. Can we take away was? No, we can't. Okay, so we need was. We can't say he in my house yesterday. So was is necessary, so we keep it. Then the answer is not A. So number 1 is necessary, we can't take it away. So A is not the answer here. In my house, can we say he was yesterday? No, in my house is necessary. Okay, it is a complement here, and it must be used for the completion of meaning. So in my home, number 2 here is necessary, so the choice is not B. Okay, B is not correct in this case. Yesterday, can we take away yesterday? Can we say he was in my home, and then we end the sentence? Yes, we can. So yesterday is an adverbial, and it is optional. It is an optional element. So in this case, in number 1, the answer will be C. The third one, the third word that is underlined, or the third phrase that is underlined, is the one that we can take away. It is not necessary. So in number 1, the answer is C. Number 3, the one underlined and has a number 3 under it, which is yesterday in this sentence, is not necessary. Look at number 2. Maha is a good student. Maha, here we have a line under Maha, and we have 1. And then is, we have a line under is, and we have 2. And then a good student, we have a line under a good student, and we have 3. And I even put spaces between them to make them clear. So Maha is the first element, is the second element, and a good student is the third element. Now, is any of those elements not necessary? So can we take away Maha? Can we say is a good student? That's it? No, we can't. So this is not a complete sentence. So Maha is necessary. Remember, we only need the elements that are not necessary. If they are all necessary, we choose D. Okay, let's look at the second element, is. Can we take away is? Can we say Maha a good student? No, in English we can't say that. This is ungrammatical. So is necessary. So then 2 is necessary, so we keep it. A good student, can we take away a good student, all of it? Can we say Maha is and end the sentence? No, it is a complement. We need it. So we keep number 3. So number 1 is necessary, number 2 is necessary, and number 3 is necessary. What do we do here? We choose D. Because all elements, every element here is necessary. So all elements are necessary. So the correct choice for number 2 is D. Number 3, the angry man waited impatiently. We have a line under angry, and we put 1 under it. We have a line under man, and then we put 2 under it. I'm sorry if it is a bit to the left, but it is understood. So we have 3 lines, and then 1, 2, 3, 1 for each line. And then we have waited, we have a line under waited, and it is number 3. So number 1 is angry, number 2 is man, and number 3 is waited. Can we take away number 1 or number 2 or number 3? Yes, we can take away which one? Number 1. Okay, we can take away angry. We can say the man waited, and the sentence will be complete. The man waited. So angry here just gives us more information about man. It is, as we said, what? A modifier. A modifier. So the man, or the angry man is a noun phrase. Angry is just a modifier. It is an adjective. It modifies man. So we can just take it away with no problem. So we can say the man waited. Okay, but we can say the angry waited. That is not correct. And we can say the angry man impatiently. That is not correct. So number 2 is necessary, number 3 is necessary, but number 1 is not necessary. So the choice will be what? Will be A. Okay, because A is 1. So A here is the correct answer, because the first element number 1, angry, is not necessary. I hope this type of question is clear for you. The next exercise, I want you to identify the basic clause structure type for each of the following simple sentences. So here we have 4 types of the 5 types we discussed. A, if it is verb to be plus complement, choose A. If it is VT, as we said, transitive verb, plus a direct object, in this case it will be monotransitive. So if it is monotransitive, you choose B. If it is ditransitive, VT, transitive verb plus io, indirect object, plus do, direct object, you choose C. So ditransitive verb, C. If it is a monotransitive with a complement, so if it is VT, verb transitive, and DO, direct object, and then C, complement, you choose D. Number 1, Faisal wrote a book. Okay, what is the structure type of this sentence? Faisal is the subject, wrote is the verb, and a book is a direct object. So subject, and then a transitive verb, and then an object. So it is monotransitive. The correct choice is B. Number 1, the correct choice is B. And number 2, he is a good writer. He is a good writer. Here we have the subject he, the verb to be is, and then the complement, a good writer. A good writer here is the complement. So the type here is verb to be plus complement. So in number 2, the choice is A. In number 3, he gave me the book. He gave me the book. He is a subject, gave is a verb, and then we have 2 objects. Me is indirect, the book is direct. So direct, indirect object with a transitive verb, the correct choice is C. Number 4, I found the book interesting. Here we have a subject, we have a verb, found, we have 1 object, the book, and then we have a complement to the object, interesting. Okay, so I found the book to be interesting. I found the book interesting. The correct choice for number 4 is D. In number 5, the book is in my library. So the book is in my library. We have the subject, the book, and then we have the verb to be is, and then we have in my library, in my library. This is a complement. Okay, so the correct choice is D. Of course, we didn't differentiate whether it is an adverbial or not, if it is type 2 or type 3, so it is not a problem here. So the book is in my library. Just choose according to what you see here. So here you see the verb to be, no, I'm sorry, in this case it is verb to be plus subject, yeah. So the book is a subject, is the verb to be, and in my library is the complement of the subject plus the verb to be. Okay, so yes, this is the answer here. In number 5, the correct choice is A. So there is no problem in this case. We have the subject, the book, the verb to be, and then in my library, which is the complement of the subject plus B. In this case, we can't say the book is an end the sentence. We need a complement. So in number 5, the correct choice is A. Okay, we have some variations of basic clause structure types. These variations are just different ways to state or say these types. So we have type 1, which is there plus an introductory, which there used as an introductory subject. So there can be used in the following example to delay the actual subject. So the actual subject can come after, and there can come before in its place. So in type 1, this is a variation of type 1. We have this sentence, 3 exceptions exist. So here we have a subject and we have an intransitive verb. So this is type 1. We can change this. Variation means something different way to say something. So the variation here, we can say there, which is an introductory subject, introductory from introduction, it comes at the beginning. And then we have the verb to be are, and then we have 3 exceptions, which is here in this case the subject but delayed. We put it after. So there are 3 exceptions. Okay, so this is a variation of type 1 using introductory there. So there is called introductory. Okay, it comes before in the place of the actual subject. The subject comes after the verb here, and this is a variation of type 1. The pattern here is there plus verb to be plus the actual subject. We have another variation using there as well as an introductory subject, and this is a variation of type 2. So some books are on the shelf, some books subject are verb to be, and then we have the complement on the shelf. This is type 2, as you remember. We can use there in this case as a variation. So we can say there are some books on the shelf. We took the subject, we put it after the verb, and we put there in its place. We call this introductory there. There are also other names for it. Okay, so but introductory there. This is for the purpose of this course. We call it introductory because it comes first. We say there are some books on the shelf. Okay, so there comes at the beginning, and then the verb to be are, and then the subject, some books, comes after the verb to be, and then we continue the sentence. There are some books on the shelf. So this is a variation. This is a different way to use type 2, using introductory there. In type 2C, we can reverse the adverb and put it before the verb and put the subject at the end. Okay, so in type 2 we have the verb to be plus the complement. The complement can be an adverb, as we saw in type 2C, a complement as an adverbial. The adverb here and there, only in those two cases. So if we have here and we have there, we can put them in the place of the subject, and we put the subject after the verb. Look at the example. Muhammad is here. This is type 2C. No changes here. So Muhammad, subject, and then verb to be, and then the adverbial here. This is exactly the way we said type 2C works. But we can change it. This is a variation. We can put here in the beginning as in the place of the subject, and the subject can be delayed. So we can say, here is Muhammad. So here comes in the place of the subject is delayed. So it is reversed. We change the position. So this is a variation of type 2C. There are, of course, other variations, but we will not discuss them here. Those three variations are enough. So I hope that was useful for you. We restated some previous information that we discussed in previous lectures, and we organized them in a different way. Hopefully that will make you understand the material we presented earlier better. In the next lecture we will start with the compound clauses, and after that with the complex clauses, and then we will have a review at the end, some example exercises and sentences that will come in the exam. All this inshallah will be in the coming lectures, the last 4 lectures. Thank you for listening, and I will see you next time.